Stuart Nash.
Mr Chair, I mean, with all due respect to the last speaker, I think what he needs to do is go and spend about an hour with the problem gambling society in his community, and he will understand the level of harm that that problem gambling actually causes. I mean, in my hometown of Napier, where Mr Mitchell's hometown of Napier as well, I've spent had a number of visits with problem gambling, and what they tell me, I know we're in the committee stage, but I just need to respond to this, Mr Chair. What they tell me is that they know that the vast majority of this money comes from those communities that can't afford it. And it goes to the sporting clubs that Mr Mitchell talks about, but it goes to the clubs that are empowered enough to actually fill in the application forms and jump through the hoops to get this money. So it's taken from one society. It's like a tax, in essence. It's taken from one group who really can't afford it and given to another who can. So the problem we've got here is that this isn't limiting people's choice. If people want to go and play pokies, if people want to go to the casino, they can do this. They can do that. But what we are saying is that there needs to be restrictions around this industry to stop people from harming themselves. This isn't aimed necessarily at the responsible gambler. I know that sounds like a little bit of an oxymoron, but the responsible gambler, this is aimed at regulating an industry that will take advantage of people given an inch. Mr Speaker, we did talk about the fact, or a number of people have alluded to the fact, Mr Chair, that Rick Barker introduced this. And this is where part of the problem is with this Act. It was introduced in 2007. Since 2007, 8 years ago, there has been a huge sort of a revolution, technological revolution in the way people interact, in the way they game. What we have here, Mr Chair, is a definition of gaming machine. And this is Part 1, Clause 5A, and it talks about a device whether wholly or partly mechanically or electronically operated that is adapted or designed and constructed for gambling and is played or confers a right to participate whether totally or partly by the insertion of money into it or by directly or indirect payment of money by any other means. What this piece of legislation did pick up is the fact that people can put an EFTPOS card or can put some sort of credit card in. But I think we would find, and the Minister may have the figures, I'm not too sure. I suspect, Mr Speaker, that a lot of people are actually gambling at home on their own PCs over the internet. And this causes a whole raft of problems in an unregulated industry. And it's not the harm, not just the harm it's caused, it's the fact that these guys don't pay tax and any of those sorts of carry on. And this is where we need to sort of update the law yet again. So I suspect in the next, or during this term, there'll be a gambling amendment bill number 3, 4, 5, whatever we're up to take into account the transition from having to go into a venue to sitting at home over your machine. And one of the things I looked at, and I couldn't quite understand it until I read the Act itself, was Part 2, Clause 9, where it talked advertising overseas gambling prohibited. And it's taken out the word of overseas gambling. In fact, what this clause in the Act, this is Section 16 in the Act itself, and the title of that section is Advertising Overseas Gambling Prohibited. And what it does, Mr Chair, it outlines a whole lot of, it outlines the reasons why, or the methods by why you can't advertise overseas gambling. But Mr Chair, anyone can go on to a vast number of websites in this country, and there are a number of advertisements for overseas gambling. And I'm not too sure, Mr Chair, how you regulate that. What we have to do, what sort of legislation can stop that, but I think this is causing just as much harm as, in fact, the premises with which this bill is trying to regulate. Now, this does come back to personal choice and that sort of carry on, but we're operating in a whole new era that I think perhaps Parliament hasn't come to grips with, and certainly our legislation is going to have to address going forward. As mentioned, not just from a minimalisation or a flouting of our laws, but from a tax perspective, which I know the Minister has had a lot to do with in the past. There's a couple of questions I've got, and I haven't had the time to take a good hard look at the Act. Part 2, Clause 38, and we talk about ministerial discretion to permit more gambling machines if clubs merge. Now, I'm not too sure if this means that if Club A and Club B, Club A has 10 machines, Club B has 10 machines, they merge and they have 20 machines, or whether, Mr Chair, Mr Chair, a couple more.
Sure, Nash.
Whether this means that it is a total of 20 machines, or you have to take only the licence operating from the merge from one of the clubs. But the fact that we have ministerial discretion, again, we look at clause 39, to permit more than 9 machines at certain class 4 venues. Why is there ministerial discretion when there should be just legislative certainty? My view, Mr Chair, is that takes away the certainty that clubs and society has, and actually puts it back in the hands of a minister to make a decision based on any number of variables that aren't necessarily transparent to the general public. But then when I look at clause 40, it talks about when territorial authority consent required. And it says if a corporate society, which is basically the new venue here, proposed to increase the number of game machines that may be operated at Class 4 venue, whether by way of an application or an amendment to a Class 4 venue licence, and whether or not in association with an application for ministerial discretion under section 95 or 96. And again, Mr Chair, I'm a little bit confused around whether a venue just needs ministerial discretion full stop, that versus when ministerial discretion and territorial authority is required. Now, it's my personal view that territorial authority should always be required, because it is often councils and council organisations that are left to pick up the mess when these things go wrong. And the social harm caused by problem gambling has been talked about by a number of speakers, but it's not just the social harm, it's the sort of people that are sometimes attracted to these venues. And so there's a whole lot of stuff that territorial authorities have to deal with. There's one other thing as well, and I'm not too sure why this is put in here, but maybe the Minister could allude to it. There's a new section 17A inserted, and it talks about the retail value of non-cash prizes must be stated as opposed to the cash value of a non-cash prize must be stated, and this is just substitutes the word cash with retail value. Is there a difference? I'm not too sure, but there must be a reason why that was inserted. A couple of perhaps questions for the Minister to answer there, but that's all I'd like to say. But I'd just like to reiterate the point, Mr Speaker, that society is moving and technology is advancing at such a rate that we need to find legislative ways to protect those who need protection, and to stop exploitation of those who are open to be exploited from those who operate outside the sort of 20th century jurisdiction. Thank you very much.
Mr Chairman.